We will now move on to our first panel discussion of the day, which is titled The School Story During COVID-19. In this session, panelists will share their views on how digital has been an important vehicle during COVID times.
It has been a great opportunity to sort of the inflection point of where technology is going to be used in the classroom. The adoption of technology, pushing schools and universities to experiment, to fail, to try, to just be out of our comfort zone. So I think, to summarize, just last 2 years has changed the education system and how we look at it forever. And I think it's been a great learning journey for everyone.
Right, thanks. Raghav, quick words from you on how the last 2 years have been.
Sure, it's been quite a whirlwind of a journey the last 2 years for all of us. But I think it's also been a time of realization that we're capable of so much more than we previously gave ourselves credit for. And here I speak about the teaching community especially. I remember when the lockdown was announced, and all schools had about a week before we had to restart our academic year around 1st, 2nd April. And the teachers were, most of the schools, of course there were some schools that were having hybrid and online and virtual even before the pandemic, but that was a much smaller niche number of schools. So when the teachers were put this question that, you're going to have to teach online and virtually, teachers said, are you mad? Like, there's no way that can happen. I need to see my students. I need to have the socio-emotional learning, all of those kinds of things. And they just said that, no, you don't know, this pandemic might last a few months and it'll be okay after the summer break. Of course, the way the pandemic went on 2 years. So it was a journey where the teachers were thrown into the deep end of the ocean and then told, now you have to learn to swim. And I must say that they rose up to the occasion and really performed very well, because it's the teachers who had to face not only the difficulty of teaching students online, but had to face a lot of parental involvement while they were teaching online. So you had a lot of parents who were there in the background giving them their inputs of how they should be teaching their lesson and all of that. So a time of introspection, a time of breaking that glass ceiling and realizing that we are capable then so much more than we give ourselves credit for.
Right, before I come to you, Kanika, I would just like to get Mr. Gururaj's input as well. In the higher education space, in the last 2 years, how did you all cope with the sudden shift in with the pandemic coming in?
Yes. Especially in the management education space. So I agree with the other panelists. But for us, the major challenge was to achieve our learning objectives. So when we look at education, we talk about bringing about change in cognition, affection and behavioral part. To put it simply, it's a knowledge, skill and attitude part. And we always believe that management education is more about change in attitude. And that most of the times happens in the campus through peer learning, through group work, through one-to-one interaction. Now this is where we faced a major challenge. And especially an institution such as ours, which depended a lot on experiential learning issues, like experiential learning methods, we had difficulty in adopting to that. Of course, we were able to rise up to the occasion, but there were issues with infrastructure. So students were all spread out in different locations. So we had a major problem there. And we really did not know. It took us time, at least for about 1 month, to understand what is right for us, which platform is right, what bandwidth is right, which technology should we go in for. So these were the challenges that we faced. Another challenge we had was getting faculty to adopt this new technology. So most of us are used to classroom teaching, which tends to be, very interactive with everyone. Learning happens concurrently. Now it has to happen sequentially from one student to another student. So, but, we did take some initiatives by way of which we could adopt technology much faster. We invested a lot in it in terms of resources and time. And then we also saw this as an opportunity. Once we had the technology in place, we could connect with the industry much more than we used to do in the physical space. See, we are located in a place called Manipal, which is a very small place. We are not in a metro. So the interaction with the industry, conducting live projects, all this increased because we had this technology on our hand. So it has been actually a challenge, but we also saw it as an opportunity and we have leveraged upon it.
Right. Yeah, thank you so much. Kanika, yours is a slightly different vocation, not directly in schools, but you're training students. So if you could tell me how your experience has been in the last couple of years with ComMutiny.
Thanks so much. Yeah, we do work with young people. We work with adolescents. I represent ComMutiny, the youth collective Vartali, and Prava, and these are coalitions and organizations that work with young people, work with youth workers, work with educators, and of course, all the work that we do have traditionally done in institutional, academic, as well as community spaces. Everything had to be turned on its head, in the last couple of years. Our work is on around essentially unleashing the leadership potential of young people, and that is the purpose of education. I very much believe that schools, academic institutions have that very same purpose. This entire period got us to actually just really innovate. Of course, there was no option. You had to move online. You had to change how you were doing things. But not just, in metros where we are, but what we were able to do is also build capacities of, grassroots workers who work with young people and adolescents to use these technology tools to access young people at a time when everyone was isolated, to get into their homes. So schools had come into everyone's homes. All of the workshops or say the spaces that we used to create were now in people's homes. And doing that and actually being able to, over time, as things open up, also build communities around it. So how your family gets involved, and your elder siblings get involved, and your community gets involved, just as you as a young person get involved there. And so, I mean, we can talk some more, but the innovations really were around that, is just continuing those spaces and those experiences for young people.
And I think right now, I mean, this is all really normal for us. I mean, we've evolved to accept that, we have Mr. Gururaj sitting many hundreds of kilometers away, and we are sitting here. And I think that's what the entire digital innovation has done in the last 2 years, to bring educators and students together from across geographies. So that brings me to my next question. Do you think this kind of a model can kind of continue, where you could probably be looking at getting the best faculty for specialized education from different parts of the country, not necessarily physically present in the school? Tristha?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for students to work across campuses, so a lot of collaboration, a lot of lack of barriers in terms of getting people into the classroom, taking students outside virtually. So definitely, I think one of it is bringing the best minds into the classroom, and applies even to experts, it applies to faculty members, applies to co-curricular activities. Really, the barriers have definitely come down.
Okay. Raghav, if I was to ask you, what's the experience been with your teachers? How did they adapt? I mean, we've all seen the students adapt, and parents rushing them to sit in front of a computer and attend class and all that. But how have teachers adapted to this new normal?
Absolutely. So it was a great challenge to start with, especially the teachers who are not necessarily tech savvy. In every school you have a few teachers who are the senior teachers, and they're probably in the 50, 55 age group plus, or may not even be, but they are used to their style of teaching, which is also very good. But now being asked to sit in front of a screen and deliver that same quality lesson is, of course, a big challenge. Now, I can tell you about, we had one teacher in one of my schools in Baroda. I'll give a small example, an anecdote. And she was one of those senior teachers, very, very good teacher. And initially when it went online, she was kind of still trying to find her feet, and she spoke to the principal and said, Preeta ma'am, I'm not going to be able to do this. How will I manage? And this is not for me. Technology is not my thing. When classes resume, I'll come to school again. So we said, no, you're going to manage. You're going to have to do it. And then it took 15 days, 20 days, and then it took the summer break, and she's practiced. And now she's still one of the best teachers. So eventually, pedagogy or teaching learning or education, the fundamental crux on what good education is based is the human relationship. The relationship a teacher forms with a student. If she can form that relationship, whether it's on a screen or in a physical atmosphere, that is what's going to actually develop the skills and the learning capacities of the child, what is called metacognition, getting children to learn how to learn. So the best teachers can do that. The best teacher is not one who knows when to teach, but who knows when not to teach. So teachers like this that I gave you an example of, they were thrown into the deep end of the pool, but I can say they're swimming against the current in the ocean right now with flying colors.
Right. Mr. Gururaj, if I was to come to you, I mean, in the higher education space, there's a certain way in which, lectures are taken, students are there in a large classroom and there's a professor. How did that really pan out for you?
See, actually, we had noticed in the last 5, 6 years, the students by and large prefer digital content. So that stopped reading newspapers, they were into this in shorts. It had already started actually, even before COVID, right? And we had increased requests from students, why don't you give us textbooks on Kindle, right? So we had started that journey, but I think COVID only speeded it up. Now, as far as the teachers are concerned in the higher education, especially in the management education, we had a challenge. We had a 3-dimensional space and suddenly we had to move to a 2-dimensional space. Right. So, for us, the pedagogy would be a mix of lectures, in-class exercises, and we had so many things. We had the blackboard, we had the LCD, we had the faculty member, and the students were right ahead of us. So, it became a little difficult for us. But let me also tell you, there are some of the initiatives that we have taken as B schools. There is one very well-known B school in Mumbai which invited all its faculty members, including the visiting faculty and guest faculty, and trained them on this online teaching.
Right.
And we also, what we did was, we said to our faculty, you cannot sit in front of your computer, you have to go to the classroom. We made our classrooms ready for online teaching with digital boards installed. Right. But there were issues. We are basically an institute which believes in reflective, participant or student-centered learning. So there is more of student reflection there. They learn from one another, and it happens concurrently. Doing cases was very, very difficult, right? So, and also sitting in front of the computer, it can also result in screen fatigue. And you have students face, he's physically present, he or she, now you have only 1 square inch of the student. So all these issues were there. That is why we moved into the classroom with large digital boards, and we cut down our classroom session from 90 minutes to 1 hour. We also made class size very small so that the faculty member can focus on each student and, sort of personalize the delivery.
Right.
And we also trained our faculty on the use of different formats. We had Zoom, we had WebEx, and we had Teams, right? So these are some of the technology initiatives we did. Even for assessment also, we went through a digital platform for assessment. It was initially very difficult for faculty, but now we are all very, very comfortable.
Right. Kanika, in your work area, did you all have any such issues with technology? I mean,
Certainly, I mean, like I said, one is the sort of diversity of youth workers or facilitators that we work with aren't necessarily adept at using technology, and so even that initial hesitation or capacity building that we needed to do was very critical. I think just that fear of technology. The other thing I wanted to add, just to even what Raghav was saying, is one is these technology tools are constantly evolving and becoming more and more sort of adaptive to how life was before. You're able to do so much more interactively, but pedagogically, that human touch. And what does a teacher do when, or a facilitator, when everyone's screen is, video is off and everyone's on mute, and you don't know whether the child is listening or not, and you don't know what's happening. And so there is some reorganizing, reframing we need to do in how we're delivering what we are as well. And using certain, so I mean, we have principles we refer to even in our offline work, but we needed to apply that in our online as well, because that while you could perhaps retain the interest of a child just through an engaging one-on-one, with the teacher delivering and 20 children, 30 children listening, that doesn't work in online. And that's true for any kind of facilitative experience also. And so that retraining training sort of new people to do that was something that I feel we need to continue, because as Tristha was saying, it is the future. We will continue like this. I mean, it has nothing to do with COVID anymore. But it's also opened up so many dimensions for us to be able to use technology.
I think it's also a coincidence that the NEP 2020 came in at exactly that point when the pandemic also hit. So for students to adapt, it was, I think, an appropriate time, and everyone just had to dive into the deep end of the pool. But now that digital education is here to stay, how do you see yourselves taking this forward? If I have to start with the Ekya group of schools, do you have like a plan now to keep it blended going forward? Because there are a lot of opportunities also here, and if you could just walk me through that.
Yeah, I think how we are looking at it as we are planning the new academic year to be launched in June, we are expecting our middle and senior school children to bring their devices. And, when the pandemic hit for the past 2 years, obviously, as all schools have done, you have an LMS, and assessments have changed, become more dynamic, a lot of data-driven decisions are being made. So we will continue using our LMS. We don't want to sort of pull back on that, so that push will continue, so work will be sent home, sort of flipping the classroom a bit more. We're seeing school, and we want to use school as a co-learning space. So can we do more of the fun stuff in school and, watch the video at home, do some of the assessments at home. And so school is a place for connection and community. That's how we're imagining and utilizing the tools that we learned through the pandemic for the new version of school. And also, like we talked about, bringing people from the outside in and allowing students to experience more of the world while being in school. So can we have virtual tours of museums from around the world, have those conversations? And so I think we are really pushing for community and connection.
Right. Raghav, you see a good opportunity now that people are comfortable with digital education in your group of schools?
Absolutely, there's a lot of opportunity, but Roshan, I want to actually qualify that a little bit. The education system of the entire world, the way curriculum is transacted, has been totally transformed by the way the pandemic has hit us. There's no doubt in anyone's mind that the digital transformation has changed the way that pedagogy happens in classrooms across the world. More importantly, though, is the purpose aligned with the way these trends are emerging, the way the trends are evolving? In the hot pursuit of AR, AI, VR, virtual learning environments and all, have we missed the woods for the trees? Now, it's not a question of if, but when, at least some of these technologies will become mainstream in classrooms across the world. But the fundamental question still lies, are we serving the purpose? Getting our children ready with those 21st century skills, getting them ready to maximize their inherent talents, excel at what they are best in, or are we just finding fancier ways of lesson delivery through e-pedagogues? Now, there is no better time than a crisis that forces us to grow and wakes us up from the slumber of rudimentary pedagogy. We can ill afford another education system that tests students in and prepares students for skills that they won't even require in their 21st century lifetimes. What are the tests measuring today? For a large part, memorization, regurgitation. So the NEP actually you mentioned is very, very good in that it shifts the focus from inputs to outcomes, from content mastery to competence mastery. So that's very, very good. I think it's incumbent upon us, the education leaders, the thought leaders, the media, to shoulder this responsibility of this evolution of education so that our posterity is going to look back at this time as one of those defining moments that comes once in centuries. And they'll either thank us for taking this evolution in the direction which will truly benefit our 21st century students the most, or they're going to curse us for not rising up to the opportunity when we had the occasion.
Right. Mr. Gururaj, if I was to come to you, in the higher education space, is there any kind of training needed for your professors because they've been used to a certain way of taking uh, classes,
Yeah.
and now that we have this opportunity, what new areas are you looking at?
See, this digital journey has been a journey of exploration for us. 2 years ago, we had to go whole hog because we had no other alternative. We really did not know whether it is going to enhance learning or is it going to come in the way of learning. But we had to do it. So in these 2 years, we realized that, okay, there are certain things which actually enhance learning, complement learning, but there are certain things which probably cannot be done through digital. So I would like to be a little, skeptical on this. Today morning, I was talking to an ex-colleague of mine who is a professor in IIT and is currently in US. And he has taken his son with him who is doing schooling there. So, and he was saying that in US, they are very, very clear. The government is very clear that sitting at home can do much more damage than going to school. Right. See, I see that today's generation is becoming extremely socially shy.
Yes.
Right. So the kind of interaction they have with the outside world has come down drastically. So I think we should never take that opportunity away from them. Right. So when it comes to higher education, definitely yes, we are now moving more into blended. We are now tying up with other schools. We are getting more and more industry people to talk to our students, talk to our faculty. We are doing programs online. We are offering programs online to those executives who cannot quit their jobs to do their higher education, right? And we are also adopting more and more content, which is, probably, there are a lot of case studies which were in the paper mode. Now they have been transferred into the video mode,
Yes.
right? So we are doing that, but I guess there is a lot of peer learning that happens.
Yes.
A lot of personalization needs to happen in the classroom, right? Whether that can be done or no. See, we're talking about transferring knowledge. Yes, maybe yes, but how do you transfer skills?
Yeah.
How do you change the attitude? Now, these are bigger issues, right? So technology, yes, definitely is a tool as long as it complements and enhances learning. But technology for the sake of technology is something which I am little skeptical about, but I'll also make a disclaimer. My PhD is in the area of high technology products. Okay.
Right. No, no, so I think we all agree that a blended model is needed because that face-to-face interaction is needed. But can technology now be used to actually expand the scope of learning? Maybe getting in completely virtual classrooms, if that is an idea, to people who previously probably didn't have access to this kind of education. Can you expand your classroom capacity? So you have 30 students in a class, but now can you actually reach out to 60, 90, maybe 120 by doing simultaneous virtual sessions? Is that an idea?
It's an idea, but personally, and as from the organization point of view, we are focused on our kids. Just so much has happened, and I'm sure that's many people can consider that, but we have larger problems just with the students that we have. Socio-emotional well-being, childhood obesity, and learning gaps. If we were to focus just on the students that are in our classrooms, we have a lot of work to do there. And so that is again a focus of coming back to school. They haven't even seen each other, they don't know each other, they don't have, the friendships haven't been formed, they've lost a part of their childhood. Can we really fix that first for the students that we have in our classroom? So that's our priority.
Absolutely, and I totally echo what Tristha is saying, because we all know that technology can easily deliver content. There's no problem. With a swipe of a button, with a swipe of a screen, you have access to limitless content. By the time today's kids grow up, they are going to be auto-prompted with AI and other technologies for the next task that they have to complete. So what are we then valuing? What are we measuring? The ability to have knowledge? In the 21st century, the world will not reward you for how much you know, but for what you can do with what you know. Not for the amount of knowledge that you have, but how you apply the knowledge that you have. So we know that technology can easily deliver content, but it's only a human teacher in a human setting that can inspire, encourage, and spark that imagination, inquiry, and curiosity inside a child's brain, which technology cannot do.
Right. Kanika?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I mean, so I completely agree, right here. And what I do want to add, though, what technology is doing, which technology previously did not do, or how we can use it to our advantage in that sense is platforms, the algorithms on platforms are typically designed to keep you in your echo chambers. When you have these blended models, as educators, as facilitators, we can create spaces using technology to actually bring diverse people together, which is a huge part of education. Many of our educational spaces also, by virtue of, say, what they cost or where they're located, remain relatively non-diverse. Technology now allows, and that's what we are seeing in the work that we do, is you can bring urban and rural kids together. You can bring people together across castes and classes, but you have to work that out. I don't think you can rely on technology or platforms that are, doing it mechanically somewhere. You need a human being to be able to see what's the diversity in my space, how are they interacting with each other, what is that interaction resulting in, and what are people experiencing, how do we take care of that?
Okay. So I think, we were running a little short on time because the previous session went over. So I just want to take quick closing remarks from you all on how the assessment would probably need to change now that we've got a whiff of digitalization in schools, and can this be actually used to improve the way we measure the skills that our students are learning in school?
I think the foundation for personalization has been laid, which means can we chart individual learning paths for every student, and can we give them the right question at the right time and really make their journey their own. I think the foundation has been laid, but we still have a long way to go.
Okay.
So I think personalizations in assessments is something that can come up.
Okay.
So I think that's the multi-million-dollar question. How do you make assessments more effective, and what is the purpose of assessments? Now, what are tests? Tests are meant to be diagnostic in nature. So they're meant to diagnose the strengths and the weaknesses of the learning journey of the child so the teacher can adjust her lesson delivery accordingly. That's what a test is supposed to be. What is a test in our country and a lot of Asian education systems? A way to put a label on a student's forehead. So you got 98, you get a label on your forehead called genius. If you get 80, you get called, nowadays 80 is called average or just above average. If you get 50 and 60 and 40 or 30, they're terrible, pathetic terms like duffer and all people use. Now, who has given anyone the right to label a child on a forehead on the basis of what marks they got on the exam? What is that marks measuring? Their ability to memorize and regurgitate? In the 21st century, anyways, they don't need that. So the assessment system needs to change to actually measure the skills of students, the leadership, the critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, resilience, ability to cope with limited resources. So all of those are the skills that we need to measure. The NEP talks about that. But the question is how? Our education system, the way it's set up, the purpose of schooling for a very large part is to get into the best college. What do you need to get into the best college? The highest marks. What are the marks measuring? Rote. What are the parents and children and students and education schools and systems going to run behind? The same thing. So that is where it needs to change. Once, if we start valuing the right things, as opposed to the marks on the exams which are measuring rote, we're going to be stuck in a vicious circle which needs to change.
Right. I think this question would be directed to Mr. Gururaj also. I think since you're in the higher education space, you all look at marks for students coming into your colleges. But is that something that you think can change, going by what Raghav just said?
I fully with Mr. Podar when he said that, school education is all about getting good marks and getting into a good college. But fortunately for us, what we have been doing over the years is that we have done away with that. So we depend more on the application part, and the assessment is also more on the application part, where students are assessed based on the projects they do. But see, there is one thing that I would like to highlight. Today, educators have adopted, right? But there is one thing which is lacking is there is not much of the research which is going on in online education and its effectiveness. Now, that is one area which could be of great help to educators. Now, take for example, recently I got this book, right? Now, this talks about case method for digital natives, an excellent book for educators.
Okay.
So, what are the rubrics that we should have when we do online teaching? What are the proper assessment techniques? Which techniques are more effective in terms of actual learning and internalization? See, I guess we need a lot of research in this, and that needs to be shared among educators. In the West, yes, that is happening. But I believe that in the Indian context also, we need to do it.
Right.
So that is one area I would suggest which would greatly enhance the adoption of the right techniques of assessment and the right pedagogies also.
Okay. Kanika, a quick last words from you.
I mean, I just wanted to add to that, which is that, this pipeline of assessment and valuing what needs to be assessed, the competencies we're talking about, the capabilities, there is a demand-supply issue as well. And I do think we need, to be able to create metrics that can be valued at the, finally what everyone wants, needs is a job. But how are those metrics? Then right now the easy metrics is, what marks you've got, therefore what institution you've gone into, and very little to do with really what are the life capacities you have gained. And so I think there is a link there that between education and the job market we need to make in order for these life capacities that we really truly want to deliver through education in schools, they get valued up that chain.
Right. Okay. So I think we are out of time now, and we need to continue with the rest of the summit. Thank you so much for joining us, and it was very interesting to hear, your journeys in the last 2 years, what happened, and ideas of how we're going to take this forward with digitalization coming in. Thank you so much. With it, back to you.
Thank you so much, Roshun. And can we have a huge round of applause for all our panelists? Thank you.